Today, my guest is Rodney Anderson. Rodney is a lifelong Grand Prairian who graduated from Grand Prairie High School in 1986 and received his bachelor's degree in real estate from UTA in 1990. In 2010, he decided to serve his city and was elected to serve in the Texas House of Representatives. During his time in office, he fought for the private property rights of citizens of the state and was recognized to the 2011 Legislative Honor Roll by the Texas Association of Realtors. In 2019, he was elected as the chairman of the Dallas County Republican Party. He talks to me today about how bills become laws, how citizens of the state can change legislation through their elected officials, and how to have an effective voice in their state of Texas. Without further ado, here's Rodney Anderson. Hello, sir.
Hey, guys.
Well, I have to tell you, you are the number one suggested person for me to have interviewed. Like, since I started all this, I'm not kidding. Like, every time I say anything, people are like, have you talked to Rodney? Have you talked to Rodney?
That's very flattering to hear. Very flattering to hear.
Yes. Well, so just a little bit of background on you. So you graduated from Grand Prairie High School. Mm-hmm. So you've lived in Grand Prairie your whole life.
Yep. I was born and raised here. Used to throw the Grand Prairie Daily News. That's how long I've been here.
Yes, I interviewed Randy Jennings. We kind of talked about the Grand Prairie Daily News a little bit.
And that was I actually have some old clippings that Randy it's funny. I actually have them hang on. Let's see if what I pull out here has his name on it. Oh, that's a wedding deal. I bet this is, let's see. Yep. If you happen to see it, it's Randy Jennings. I don't know.
Yes.
It shows up backwards in my, this COVID thing, we've been cleaning up some of our old, those closets that you never go into and those boxes you never go into.
Yep.
My wife has successfully done a lot of that, and we came across some old clippings, and I haven't had a chance to read them. She was just throwing stuff away. I'm like, I want to see what's in there. It's just fun times. Back when journalism, local journalism really meant something, and you could look and you could see that your grandson had gone 2 for 3 in a local, baseball game or whatnot. Lots of fun stuff like that.
Yeah,
so that's how far back I go.
It's definitely, he and I talked a lot about that. We actually talked about the wedding. He goes, when you had when that was your job in the local paper to report on the weddings, he goes, you want to know how people got involved in that kind of thing. He's like, you better hope that you reported it accurately and the right picture was used. It was kind of funny.
Yeah, those are but good times. But yeah, I was born and raised here in Grand Prairie. Grew up just up from Cottonwood Park, which is now Jennifer McFalls Park for the new folks. And
talking to her on Thursday.
Okay.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. I mean, how many Olympians do we have from Grand Prairie? I mean, there's a few, but there's not many. So no offense to Miss McFalls, that I still call it Cottonwood Park. It's just we grew up there, and then I went on to UT Arlington and got a degree in real estate from UT Arlington, and actually went to school there on the Durwood Sutton Real Estate Scholarship. And for some of the other old timers in Grand Prairie, they'll recognize the name Durwood Sutton, one of the old line bankers in town. And Marshall, his son, is still here and still doing some banking work as well. So anyway, long time off, but I'm one of the guys that I was not part of when I say the in crowd. I was kind of the outsider, politically speaking, and so politics has been an interesting time over the last about 10 years for me, and still involved in it today.
So when did you graduate? What year?
86 from Grand Prairie High School. And
gotcha.
That was I am a child of the 80s, and anyone who says that 80s music is not the best decade of music obviously has no taste in music.
I recently
I started watching a bunch of 80s movies. Like I've always, because I was born in 1980, so probably the childhood movies that I watched and ones that you watched might have been a little bit different.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
There was 80s movies I started catching up on, and I actually really want to do like a limited series podcast about like watching 80s movies as an adult versus watching them as a child. And
totally
it's
different.
just interesting. Yes, totally.
Yeah, I would love to see them try and make Breakfast Club today.
Oh, Caddyshack. Try making Caddyshack.
Yeah, there's certain movies that that even some of the high school coming of age movies you could not make these days.
I watched Fast Times at Ridgemont High and I was like, that makes me sick. It was bad. It was bad. So like, it's funny.
Yeah, but that's Fast Times at Ridgemont High is one of those movies I'll watch. Just when it comes on, whether it starts at the very beginning or the very end, it really doesn't matter. It's just again, being a child of the 80s, that's just that's just me. But then again, I have very strange and eclectic tastes in movies and music. I love 80s music, but
you were a teenager when that came out. See, that's totally different.
Completely different.
Yeah,
completely different. So
as a 40-year-old mother, I can't watch that movie. Like, no,
no, it is different. It definitely is different. And just for the record, that's a Coke. That's not a Coors Light or anything like that. That is a.
Yeah, I got my dad Dr. Pepper in my little Texas cup today. So, but for those that don't know, you were a representative with the state. You were
I was a state rep. I was elected in 2010. Served in 11 and 12. Redistricting drew me out. That's a long story. I came back, served 2 more terms from 14 to 18, and it's real. That was a really interesting period of time. And I think that's what was some of the things we're going to talk about today. Again, as a child of the 80s, you grow up watching Schoolhouse Rock, and I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill. That is a great textbook example of the way a bill works, and has absolutely nothing to do with the way the process actually works. It is as Bo Pilgrim once said about boneless chicken, it's a mind-boggling thing. And unless and until you actually been in the middle of that process, it's like trying to explain to someone what milk tastes like who's never tasted milk before. Unless you've been a part of the process, you just can't do it justice.
Yeah. That's part of the exact reason I'm having you on today. I mean, is to kind of talk a little bit about how the state of Texas, as far as from a government perspective, how it kind of works, how it functions. And then, and I felt like you were the perfect person to talk about this, because especially now when you're going through, I think that sometimes people don't really question a lot of that stuff unless there's a reason to. And right now we have the whole COVID thing going on. And so my question immediately was like, where do counties fit into this? Like, is it counties? Is it cities? And then how does that go? And so there's just a bunch of different questions. So I guess my first question would be, does Texas function the same as other states in the United States?
In most respects, yes. Texas has it's called a bicameral government, where we have both a state house, a state senate. We have a governor, and we have a Supreme Court, and we have a court system to oversee. So it really is modeled after most of the country. You still have one state, I believe, that is unicameral, that means the House and Senate are all self-contained. But in general, we operate, the state operates at the same way even the federal government does. The House and the Senate, the House will generate a bill, or the Senate will generate a bill. It'll go over to the other side. They have to approve it. They have to sign off on it. Once they sign off on it, it goes to the governor. If the governor vetoes it, he can veto it, or she can veto it in that case. And it's been that way for 200 and however since 1845. And it's interesting because you see these swings. If you go back historically, the state of Texas was up until about 1990 almost an entirely democratically run state, Democrat-run state. Up until about 1990, there were 3 or 4 Republicans in the House, maybe 5 or 6. Dating back into the into the 80s. I may be getting my dates mixed up. You had 3 or 4 back in the 80s. Once in 90 is when it actually flipped, came over onto the Republican side. But you go back into the 70s and 80s, and it was a completely democratically run state. The Democrats in those days were almost as divided as Republicans can be today in this state, where you have moderate Republicans, more conservative Republicans. You have this. No individual fits entirely within a single political party, and that's one thing that when I'm doing presentations like this, this is completely nonpartisan, and that's one of the things you'll find about me is that while I am a Republican, I understand the way the process works. And in Texas, unlike the federal government, you have to have, in almost all cases, you almost always have to have folks from the other side that are helping you, because it is so much easier to kill a piece of legislation than it is to pass it. What I want folks to understand is the way Texas has been a Republican state since about 2000 is when it flipped. So for the past 20 years or so, it's been Republican. Before that, it was Democrat, and it ebbs and flows. And you'll have. I remember being asked in 2011 after I was elected. I was asked by a reporter from the Texas, I wouldn't call him a reporter, but he was one of the owners of the Texas Tribune, Evan Smith. I was in a panel discussion, and he asked me, what do Republicans have to be concerned about now that you have a supermajority in the House and the Senate? And I made the statement that we have to be careful of overreach. And he asked a follow-up question. He said, can you give an example of overreach? And at the time, I couldn't. But looking back over the past 5 or 6 years, where Republicans have gotten into their own internal squabbles, there was some overreach on each side, and it's just interesting to watch how that's happened. And we're seeing it now, even on the Democratic side. You're seeing this war on the Democratic side between the more liberal folks that were with good heavens, Sanders followers and Biden followers. I mean, you can see the disagreement even there. On the Republican side, you had Tea Parties versus moderates. I mean, you had the same conflict, and so it's interesting to say, well, you have fringes on both sides, and those fringes, what tends to happen when the political sausage is being made, and those political fringes tend to be pushed further and further out. And so you have, now, does that happen all the time? No, but you almost always have, at least in the state of Texas, a bipartisan group that comes up with legislation that it may not make everyone happy, but by and large is good for the state. And that's why the process is set up to make sure you can kill legislation faster than you can actually pass it, because quickly passed legislation typically is poorly passed legislation. So that's where the state, how the state kind of works.
Well, and I have a little bit of experience with this with you personally, because I think it was a couple years ago, or last year maybe, I called you and I said, there's this thing going on with some type of, it was reporting of minors deaths in the news. And it was, I said, you know, there's this thing, there's this issue. And you said, I think this is a great thing that we need to, you know, we should push. And this is something that, it doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican, this is something you're going to care about because this involves children, right? But I remember you kind of let me in a little bit, and you're like, well, we need to find 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats that can both be equal, because this is a bill that needs to go through that way. I got a little bit of a glimpse of that in terms of, like, you know, kind of how the process goes. And then you have to have somebody that presents it. And then you have to have, and so there has to be that process. And I wouldn't have even have thought about it being, having to be like that. But then immediately, that's exactly how it has to be if it's going to pass. You know what I mean? It has to be.
The old phrase, 2 things you don't want to see being made are sausage and legislation. I've seen legislation be made, and it is absolutely true, because I have seen good legislation die because of the author of the bill. I have seen bad legislation pass because of the author of the bill. I've seen how some of the pettiness that you would see in grade school politics can absolutely come into play. I have seen how, and I've seen it at the state level, I've seen it in local levels, I've seen it at the county level. You kind of have this, you saw about a month or so ago, this push and pull between the governor of the state of Texas and the county judge here in Dallas, where you even had the mayor of Dallas siding in some cases with the governor, in some cases with the county judge. And so there's all this, there's a lot of push pull, there's a lot of, you hear the phraseology backroom deals. They're not backroom deals. They're typically made in a conference room, sitting around a table with a bunch of staff and a bunch of legislators trying to hammer out legislation. And if you saw all the ugliness that goes on, it would cause some folks to lose faith in the system. As somebody who's been there, it's just like on your deal. If I were still there, what we would have done, I know exactly who I would have gone to in those cases. And that's why experience does matter. And you figure out real quick, when you're in Austin, you're one of only 150 people, and it takes 76 people to pass a bill. And the first thing you got to do is you got to get it out of committee. And that's sometimes not the easiest thing in the world. And then once you get it through you get your votes on the House floor, you got to get it through the Senate. I'll never forget, we got a House bill done my first year that would have gotten rid of the fitness gram. I don't know if you know what the fitness gram is, but I guarantee you that any high schooler, middle schooler, or elementary school from 5th grade on knows what that is. And it's basically a test that everybody has to take, and they end up taking it in front of everybody. They got to do push-ups, sit-ups, and they got to be able to. And so when you have overweight kids, or you have kids that are very slight, maybe not very healthy, how many chin-ups, and they're having to do this in front of their peers. We were able to pass that.
I did it. Yeah.
Okay. We were able to get it removed in the House. We took it over to the Senate, and we had a certain senator that killed it deader than a doornail. We passed it unanimously off the House floor, and we actually did it 2 different times. We did it once in 2011. We did it again in 2014, I believe. And when we did it in 2014, that's actually when Roger Staubach actually wrote a letter to the chairman of calendars of just about how bad my bill was. And the chair of calendars came over to me and he says, it's not often that I get a Hall of Fame quarterback saying just how bad somebody's legislation is.
Oh my gosh.
And the thing about it is, you've got to understand who was being hit by that. There is a very, and I'm not going to put names in, there's a very famous group out of Dallas that is tied in with all the schools. They have the only software that will run that program. They are the only data collection where they're using our kids as guinea pigs for free, collecting mountains of data, and then selling software to community, to school districts, and then utilizing the data to sell books. So somebody was making a bunch of money off of that. When somebody's making a bunch of money and you're passing something that's going to cut that off, now what? What are they going to do? They're going to hire a lobbyist, and that lobbyist is going to go over to say, hey, Senator so-and-so, he really wants to make sure you're taken care of, and this is why this bill is a bad bill. And one of the things in the Texas legislature, you cannot accept campaign funds during session. 30 days before, 30 days after, you cannot accept campaign funds. That's to keep you from being bought while legislation's being worked. That's the theory behind it. So in this particular case, that senator, we couldn't even get it heard in committee. And I'll never forget, this individual walks into my Capitol office, and he stands. I stand up, shake his hand. I have no idea who he is. He's there with his lobbyist, and he takes a ring off his finger and he tosses it on my desk, and he says, "You know what that is?" I said, "It's a ring." He goes, "That's a Super Bowl ring, is what that is." And if you're looking back on that moment, I should have said, "Well, anything that you leave on my desk is mine. Are you giving that to me? Is that the?" But it was, and he was not a player. He was a physician for the Cowboys through the 70s and early 80s. That he has we call them vendor bills. He has a vendor contract with the state of Texas and with all these school districts. And I'm not this was just a single example, because I could give you hundreds of them that are this way, where somebody has figured out a data set, something that folks that need or want, and they set it up to where they basically become a single provider. And then once they become that single provider, they're going to try and protect it legislatively any way that they can. And you'll see that whether it's an individual company providing computer services or textbooks, publishing, copying contracts, there's any number, and there's nothing whatsoever illegal about it. Nothing whatsoever. It's part of the process. Now, that does not fit into I'm just a bill here on Capitol Hill.
Right.
That's
exactly right. Yeah. So for those people that don't know, how many representatives do we have and how many senators do we have in the state of Texas?
The state of Texas has 150 state representatives. Each one represents somewhere between 185,000 and 205,000 people. You have 31 state senators, and they represent roughly between 1 million and 1.1 million across the state. Every 10 years, that's why the census, anyone that's watching this, if you've not filled out your census data, you need to fill out your census data. And this is not a Republican thing, a Democrat thing. And I will tell you, if you're undocumented and you're watching this, you still need to fill out the census data, because the data that's how apportionment is done. Now, apportionment normally folks think of as just redistricting. that it's a portion basically, on population. But that apportionment deals with everything from federal highway funds coming back from the government that are our tax dollars going in, to Medicaid dollars that flow down back from the feds, to any number of federal programs. And so make sure you fill that out. It takes about 10 minutes to do it online. I happen to get the long form, which they ask all other kinds of stuff. And so if you get it, just fill it out.
So okay, the representatives that are in the state of Texas, are those the same representatives that are in DC? Yes. So
they are
yes,
not.
they're not.
They're not.
So when you get nominated, or when you get elected as a Texas representative for Texas, you are not going to Washington.
Nope.
That is not what your job is.
Those are congressmen. And Texas has 36, I believe, 36 congressmen as part of our, I believe that's the number. There are 435 congressmen in the around the country. Florida has the most. New York has second most, and we have third most. Florida has fourth most. So that's probably going to change. That's why, again, that's why the census is so important, because we could be picking up as many as 3 congressional seats. Wow. Which means when you have the larger your delegation is, whether it's Republican or Democrat going to DC, the stronger you are in terms of when you're fighting for military base closures, any sort of federal facility, any of that kind of stuff. New York is going to be losing, and for the first time, it looks like California will actually be losing federal representatives because of in a lot of Why are they moving to Texas? They're moving to Texas because we have a great economy. Even during this COVID stuff, we've survived it a lot better. We're faring a lot better than a lot of other areas. Even with that, we also have right now this oil and gas. The oil and gas markets are in a complete turmoil as demand globally has fallen, and that impacts everything here in the state of Texas. The rainy day fund that is funded by oil and gas severance taxes, transportation. We moved a large portion of that over to transportation to help fund roads in Texas, so that we don't have to continue that everything we build is not a toll road. So I could go on, and I'll take it wherever you want to take it. But there's 435 federal congressmen, and there's 150 state representatives of Texas. We still have to. We can't. At the state level, we can pass resolutions encouraging Congress to do things. They typically look at resolutions and they go, "Oh, thank you very much. The toilet paper's over there in the corner." That's just what they do. Most resolutions are that way. When a governmental entity does a resolution asking the other side of government to do something, they normally look at it and go, "Thank you for playing," and that's hope you feel better.
Well, I'm glad you said toilet paper, because I know you were not specifically. That's exactly the conversation that actually spurred me to want to talk to you, because it was the question about it was the toilet paper. They limited the amount, but they limited it through a county judge, and then so my question was like, where does the county fit in? Where does the county fit in? Where does the city fit in? And so what you're describing is like, when it comes to being represented in the actual government of the state of Texas, all of the state of Texas is drawn out in districts, right? Yeah. So for y'all's perspective, it really doesn't matter what city you're in. It does, but it's a drawn boundary.
All right, here we go. Here we go. I'll give you the 10,000 foot level. There are 254 counties in the state of Texas.
Right.
Each county. And counties exist as a function of state government. State government has created counties to drive down rules and regulations. So they created counties. The county judge, so in Dallas County, county judge is Clay Jenkins. Clay, he is given certain authority under the Texas Code as the county judge. Now, you get into rural counties, the county judge is the most powerful person in the county. They do everything from who gets which subdivisions get roads, which county road, which farm to markets get paved, which dirt roads get grading. The county judge is king of their castle. And when you get into metropolitan areas work a little bit differently, as most of them have county commissioners that work with the county judge. Here in Dallas County, we have 4 county commissioners, 4 commissioners districts across the county, along with county judge.
So not all counties have county commissioners?
Not all counties have county commissioners.
Okay.
Because you have some counties in West Texas that have 800 people.
Right.
I mean, it's just so the county judge does everything, and there are certain requirements within the code that say once it passes a certain amount, they have to have commissioners, that kind of stuff. So let's get to the toilet paper issue, or to the.
I would also say that's why Governor
order.
Abbott's. That's why it's important when you hear things that Governor Abbott says. That's why he put stipulations about numbers of people in certain places. Because Texas can be so varied that it's different.
It's a huge state. It's a huge state. And for those that don't know, if I'm sitting here in Grand Prairie, if I were going to drive to Los Angeles, El Paso's halfway. I mean, that's how. I mean, it is further to drive from Houston to El Paso than it is El Paso to LA. So it's a huge state. So one size truly does not fit all. But the county judges draw their power and their authority to make those it's called Section 418 of the Texas Government Code. The Texas Government Code is what are the laws that say this is how counties are going to operate. In 2013, there was a change made that would allow a county judge to regulate, quote, ingress and egress into a disaster area. Okay, so it was set up in 2013, and it was done because you had people that refused to leave disaster areas after hurricanes. And so that a county judge could say, hey, look, we're going to evacuate you whether you want to or not, kind of thing. Well, no one ever contemplated that you would have a statewide state of emergency that was set, one, you had a federal disaster declaration, which allows states to draw down federal funds. You then had the governor say the entire state is a disaster area, at which point there came this conflict. And you saw some of that fairly early on between what the governor said and what the county judge would say. You would see the governor issue here's what you're going to do, and then the county judge would one-up it. And then it would go here, and it wasn't really a race so much to see who had the authority to do what. Each one of those individuals were trying to do what they thought was best for their county and for the state. That's really what they were trying to do. And so when you had this run on toilet paper, and you had, who has the authority to say, if Jenna Pecor wants to go in and buy, 10, packages of 24 count, could you do that? Well, you could. So if Clay Jenkins says, no, we're going to limit it to 2, the only redress that you have is to say, Judge Jenkins, you don't have the authority to tell me that. We're going to court. And and you see this right now with the the hairdresser over in the salon over in Dallas, Salon a la
Well,
mode
even a
or
real
whatever it's called.
estate agent, McKinney, sued the mayor or sued somebody because he's like, I don't know if you heard about that one.
No, I didn't. So a mayor sued the mayor?
He sued the mayor because McKinney, because of the shelter-in-place orders, this was in the beginning, he said it was unconstitutional. And so like the day after, he decided to sue him, and that did not go well for the real estate agent at the time. But like, that's what he did, is he said, I'm going to sue you. But it was the mayor.
Because the mayor, because at the time, Collin County, the county judge, had basically said, they were not nearly as restrictive as what Dallas had been. So
right.
McKinney, if I recall correctly, they passed a city ordinance, which they're allowed to do, that made it much more restrictive than what the county was doing. And so I don't know whatever happened there. The realtor probably, the county, the city has a lot more money, much bigger lawyers, and can just basically bankrupt an individual realtor or individual business owner. And so that's what you're seeing in this Salon a la mode deal, is that she's now, the old adage, you can't fight City Hall. She's now bringing down the full force and effect of code enforcement that's fining her every day that she's open. They've issued her citations, and my guess is that she will fight back, because the only redress that you have against poor legislation or poorly thought out executive orders is
right.
to go to the courts and let the courts say whether you actually did have or did not have the authority to restrict someone's purchase of toilet paper, someone's ability to open their business, and it will ultimately be the courts. I will tell you that I'm in the title insurance business. We're trying to close. I'm an underwriter. We're trying to close stuff every day of the week, while people, some people will come into the office, they're still okay with it. Others, they don't want to come into the office. So you've got what are called remote online notary statutes. Mm-hmm. Well, those notary statutes mean something. They're part of the government code. Well, you have all over the country, you have governors, you have in one case, you actually had the governor and the Supreme Court that's basically suspended those sections of the government code. And my question is, under what authority can you just suspend the law?
How do you think?
I don't know.
I'm really, really curious how you think this is going to affect government in terms of how it runs because of this COVID thing. Do you feel like this has brought out a lot of holes in places that we didn't know existed before?
It absolutely, it's brought up situations that no one has ever contemplated. And that's one of the things, to tie this back to legislation, you can pass what you think is a great piece of legislation and then come back a year later and go, OMG, we never thought about that. And that's part of what that section 418 I was talking about earlier. No one ever contemplated the entire state of Texas being under a disaster declaration and basically giving county judges, the governor, carte blanche to do what they want. Well, at what point let's take an egregious example. What I try to do anytime I'm making an argument is I try and go all the way to the extreme to show how ridiculous the argument is. If the governor said a capital offense, capital murder, we're going to suspend the prosecution of capital murderers under this COVID deal under this disaster declaration.
Right.
Does he have the authority to do that? That's question number one. And so then let's carry it to something as minute as, well, I'm going to regulate, you can only buy 2 packages of toilet paper. 2 completely extremes. This one sounds okay, fine. This one, of course not. And like, so where is it in that, where is it on that spectrum? Do they actually have the authority? And that's where that's the beauty of the United States justice system and the legal system in this country. We all have our own individual, states have their own individual laws pertaining to various, whether it be social issues, criminal issues, judicial issues. They've got all that. But by and large, there is always an opportunity for a salon a la mode to take their case to court. In her case, I'm sure she has constitutional type counsel banging her door down.
Oh, I'm sure.
You've got, and I will tell you, you've got John Wiley Price, who is a commissioner, who is pushing back extremely hard against the county judge. He had a bandana on it earlier today at Commissioner's Court of he wants barbers open, and he was very vocal a couple of weeks ago. Look, I got 5,000 people who cut hair in his district. He goes, you can get your dog groomed, but I got 5,000 people who can't work and can't get the haircut.
I literally said that yesterday. Someone was asking for a mobile groomer, and I'm like, what is going on? Yes.
And what is, in all sincerity, what is the difference between Walmart and Home Depot? Or let's say Walmart and JCPenney or Kohl's?
Right.
Other than Walmart sells food.
Right.
Okay. But you go in and people aren't just buying food, they're buying everything. Right.
Yes. And you're trying to make these decisions in a day or in hours in the middle of all this. And this is another question that I had, kind of along the same lines of the judges. And if this is a question I had back in the election, and having gone through, the divorce process and been in court for that, I was always curious, talking about partisanship, why are judges elected on a partisan platform?
That is a really, really good question, because there has been a move a move is not the right word. There has been a great deal of discussion around that, because you can have some very, very well qualified judges that are really good jurists on both, I don't care which side of the aisle you're on as it pertains to this, that are just swept out in a if you have a very unpopular president on one side, it'll sweep out people down ballot, and vice versa. And it does it all over the country. And the answer to your question is that's the way it is set up under the law. Here in Texas, that's the way it's set up. It spells out in the judicial, the section of the code that deals with judiciary, that they're to be elected, and they're to be elected at certain number of years. They serve a certain number of terms, and so the Court of Criminal Appeals only, so that the whole court doesn't turn over at once. They have elections that run, every 3-4 years that they're up. Just like city council, city council is only, you have 2 people up or 3 people up at any given time, so that the whole court doesn't completely turn over. But you can have, there has been a lot of discussion around how do you move the judicial elections to be nonpartisan, or to be at least like you would, city council or school board, where there's no party affiliation.
Right. Yes, because like, and I'm not just talking about county judges, like for people that are listening. I mean, family court judges
right.
are Democrat and Republican, which has nothing to do with being able to decide a family issue. But like, so they're all elected like that. And the other, we were talking earlier about like lobbyists and stuff. There are certain ways that, I mean, lawyers can still contribute to those elections for judges.
That's a whole different discussion.
Whole different thing. But my question was always, the first question really was, I wonder when they were setting up the Constitution of Texas, why that was even something that was even considered. When you're a judge, you're supposed to be impartial. So I was just curious.
Constitution different from the code.
Thank you for saying that. Yes.
Constitution different than the code. The Texas Constitution is a really weird animal.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't remember how many amendments we've got, 1,200, 1,500 amendments to our Constitution in Texas. We passed one a couple of years ago that says, and what has to happen, and so what has to happen in a constitutional amendment for Texas is it has to pass, the amendment has to pass by 2/3 majority in the House and the Senate, and then be signed by the governor, and then approved at an election, in a general election. So when it's put forward, the last one we did was a prohibition against a state income tax that said there will not be a state income tax. So you pass a bill that says that, and then you put it on the ballot, and it's voted on by the people of the state of Texas. So that passed by like 80%. Let's take one here locally. There's a lot of folks that would like to have gambling, that would like to have out of the track. It would take a constitutional amendment to allow any additional gaming at the track or in Texas. And there are legislators who do not want to let that happen because they're either philosophically opposed, they've got other whatever. And so again, to reach that 2/3 threshold on in the House, it's the right way to do it. That way you don't have one party that just crams legislation down on say arguably half the state of Texas that would disagree with it, regardless which side you're. So there are safeguards that are tried to be built into it. But back to your judges, there are, man, I don't know, the judges you're talking about, not just the family courts, but your criminal courts, your courts of appeal. I mean, there are hundreds of judges that you vote on, and nobody knows a thing about them. I will tell you, I'm the chair of a major party here in Dallas County, and I could not tell you 10 of the elected judges here in Dallas County. And it's not because we don't have any, knock on wood, I've not had to go to court as either a plaintiff or a defendant, whether it could be in a family court, whether it's plaintiff or defendant, and we have an adversarial way our courts work. And I hope I never do. But the point is that it was me knocking on the wood over here. Sorry, my wife just went to answer the door. Sorry, because the dog's whining at the door. It's like, no, it was me knocking on wood. Sorry. There will continue to be discussions around the partisan nature of judges, because when you have lawyers that have to go practice in front of those courts, and those lawyers who might otherwise run for office. Imagine if you're a lawyer and you run against a sitting judge and you lose. When the next time you come into court representing a client, is there going to be judicial bias because you brought up something they did in the 3rd grade or something they did back in, and it is a very, very real issue that lawyers face is, judicial retribution. And it's not something that really gets talked about, but it's also one reason why, if you have a county that is dominated by one party or the other, that you don't have a lot of people running from the other side who are going to wind up practicing in front of those judges. It's just, it's bad for business. It's bad.
What if I, as the plaintiff or the defendant, was running against that judge? What if I, you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. I do.
That's a whole. I could go down that rabbit hole for a while, because that's something that I've learned a lot about over just being in a divorce process. But one question I did have, because you were talking about kind of the Constitution, and then that the convoluted nature of some of those amendments and all that stuff. Do you feel like the reason for that is because Texas was its own nation at one point? Are there remnants for that?
Not really. It's really not. It's really more when it was originally set up. You think about, all right, we're doing it this way, and we want to make sure that we let the public vote as much as possible on these issues that we find that are critically important to the state. Taxes, schools, transportation, any of those types of major issues, going back in history of making sure that the general public had the ability to vote when needed. And you still have that at the federal level as well. And we've got, it's just the amendments to the Constitution of the United States, the bar to pass those is incredibly high. And you've got to have 2/3 in the House, 2/3 in the Senate at a federal level. And you can't get 5 people to cross party lines right now in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. It is a completely dysfunctional system. And that's one of the things that we in Texas have been really good about, is maintaining the integrity of the system. And by that, I mean, when you have in the Texas House, at one time we had 2/3 Republicans, 1/3 Democrat. So you had this 2/3, 1/3. And we had 2/3 and 1/3 of committee chairs. Even though the Republicans were in solid control of the House, you still had 1/3 of the committee chairs that were Democrats. You don't see that at a federal level. If you get a one-person majority at the federal level, right now you've got Nancy Pelosi as the Speaker of the House. If she has a one-vote majority, every one of her House chairs will be Democrats. If it were flipped and the Republicans took over, you would have a Republican Speaker of the House, and every single committee head would be a Republican. That's just the way they do it in D.C. And it's truly, it's gotten to be dysfunctional because the R's and D's can't work together up there. Because right. if they do, they're given this moniker of they can't come back 2 years and get reelected because they were either too moderate, they were too squishy, they were too they cooperated with the other side. They cooperated with the enemy, their public enemy number. You get, and it's both sides that do it. It's just political. Here in Texas, you don't have that nearly as much because one, we were only in session about 5 months every 2 years, which is plenty. You don't need more than that. Some people say, why don't we? We're a state. We run the 10th largest economy in the world, and why don't we meet year round? New York and California and Illinois all meet year round, and I don't. The legislative systems that they have and the legislative overreach, it just gives them a lot more time to meddle in people's private business. Mm-hmm. And Texas has been doing just fine. Florida does just fine with the way they meet. And again, our budget by last year was $149 billion. Is that what it was? No. God, what was it? Can't remember what the number is anymore. I
was shocked. I couldn't believe that Texas has that much of an economy compared to like other nations. Like I mean, I knew it did, but not as high as it was.
10th largest in the world. 10th largest in the world. And our number one trading partner, by the way, is Mexico. If anybody ever didn't do that. Number one trading partner by far and away is Mexico. Almost all of your parts of any car come out of factories in Mexico that come up the supply chain on 35. I was on International Trade Committee, and that is it is an incredible trading partner that we have there.
Wow.
But anyway, I think, man, it's going to drive me nuts. I'm going to have to look up what our budget was, because I want to say we went from 79 billion to about 152 billion in about 10 years. Is how much we have increased spending, and it's really the way spending's done in Texas. It's really pretty simple. The comptroller says before session, this is how much money you're going to have over the next 2 years based on our projections. And if we hit our, which are normally really good about projections, unless you have something like this COVID stuff, that just completely wreck everything, they're normally pretty good about it. And so you base your budget on that, and you either spend it or give it back. And you can only give it back in forms of tax decreases, or you spend it on whatever on everything we spend it on, from public education. Public education and health and human services account for 85% of the Texas budget. Everything else,
wow.
15% runs everything else: the judiciary, the legislative branches, transportation, parks and wildlife, everything else, 15%. So it's literally health and human services and public education. And it used to be that public education was right at 44% of the Texas budget, with it was actually 52% at one point in time, with health and human services around 30%. But last year, or the last budget cycle, was the first cycle where health and human services actually surpassed public education in terms of spending for the state. It's a huge, huge number.
Well, I know that we only have a couple more minutes, and there's one other question I wanted to ask you. So we were kind of talking about, me and Cole, I talked to Cole Humphreys the other day, and we were kind of talking about social media for elected officials right now. And I know that, like, poor Ron, is our mayor, is like always on Facebook because he's like the most accessible mayor. Like, he's just amazing about it. Well, I was on Governor Abbott's thing today, and they were talking, and George Strait was supposed to be on there reading a book. And I was like, well, this is awesome. I'm so excited. And then down below, it's just all these comments about opening the state and doing this and doing that. Yeah. So I was talking about, as an elected official in something like this, how much does social, because you want to be able to have accessibility to the people that you're, but how much does that affect your mental health as an elected official when you're seeing all that kind of stuff?
I will tell you that it varies. Because I never once, in almost 10 years of public service, I've never blocked anyone. I've never, I take that back. I was with you. I think I blocked 8 or 9 people, and that was because they were scam deals that, but
like not even a real profile.
Not even a real profile.
Yeah.
But I had a couple of folks that just ripped me up one side down the other. One of them was over the way that the state of Texas handles its kids, its at-risk kids. He had an at-risk kid, and the way he would rip me up on social media. He would call me at 9:30, 10 o'clock. He would text me. He would text me on my cell phone. And
really?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow.
But as an elected, I found that so long as I was respectful to the folks that were there, and there would be protagonists there, don't feed the trolls. I tell anybody that, don't feed the trolls. They thrive on it. They think they have a lot more power than they actually do. They like to threaten. They like to bully. They like to They like to do stuff like that. And it got to the point for me, it's like, whatever, you know, I know that in my background, when we had it done, we spent quite a bit of money early on. When you're running at a state level, they want to know.
Right.
Yeah, I came back. He goes, I've been doing this for 40 years. He goes, you're a Boy Scout. I said, yeah, there's nothing there. I've been married to the same woman for my entire life. No bankruptcies, no extra kids running around anywhere, none of that. And so anybody who comes up and threatens me with that stuff is like, let's go. I don't care. But it's, social media is something you should use to your advantage. Don't feed I wouldn't feed the trolls. And unless we were doing it, there was a buddy of mine, we had a picture of troll dolls, and when we would see it, we'd put trolling, just as we know what you're doing. It's fine. All that did was serve them. It would make them mad. They would post something else. And so we'd go out, we would, almost get in meme wars of, so it got to the point for me, and I was always accessible. I mean, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter. My Twitter handle is @RodneyAnderson. @Rodney. I will say the busiest day that I had on Twitter was when the running back for Oklahoma was accused of rape, and all of a sudden @Rodney Anderson is blowing up. I'm like, not me. This is not me. Not me. That's the running back. And I had a picture. I had my picture. I said, this is me. I'm not the running back from Oklahoma. That's not me. And so I would try and have, that was really the only really, really weird social media day was when that happened, because it's blowing up. And but I would, any local official that's watching, man, don't feed the trolls. The trolls that I had, I knew Timothy had he had an agenda. He knew it was what he was trying to do, and all I did was feed into it. If I just let him roll, and then you'd have there would be other people that would start to respond, and when you start digging, those other people are not real either. And so and I would imagine,
more local that you are, when you know what the people are saying, like, especially in something like this, where it's like, you cannot do the right thing for everybody. There's just no way. And so just to see the back and forth and this and that, and like, especially from people, I would imagine would start to get to even the strongest of people.
It does. I mean, and that's where you have to, in your responses, it has to be, I took a lot of flack from this. I've got a lot of friends on the other side of the political aisle. I do. And I took a lot of flack for some socially conservative votes that I took. And I'll never forget one that, I took it was a vote on, we were trying to protect the Catholic charities, Lutheran charities, and Baptist charities from prosecution relative to adoption. And I've got some folks on the other side that they're very good friends of mine, and it not only were they mad, but it hurt, because why did you vote that way? And when I sat down with them and explained, this is why, I got this. It was almost cathartic, because one of the guys goes, there were 2 Democrats that voted with you guys on that. And when I asked them that question, they gave me an absolute BS answer. And he said, while I don't agree with what he said, what you said actually makes sense. And so any time that I voted for something, and I think anytime, whether it be Ron, you mentioned Ron, or Cole, or any elected official, when they vote, they've got a reason for the way they voted. And it may not be something that I agree with. Lord knows there have been plenty of things I've disagreed with, from various elected bodies. But if they'll stand tall and just say, hey, this is why I did it, it's not because for the reasons you think.
Right.
If they don't accept that explanation, you got to move on. And that's what you have to do. Don't feed the troll.
Yeah. No, and I think that I was actually saying the other day, I was like, it's when you do have elected officials that are on social media and are willing to talk to you and have those discussions, take it as a blessing, because
Absolutely.
not all of them are doing that. And so, like, that's when I can go back and go, hey, Rodney, because you and I know each other outside of social media. It's not like that's how we met or anything, but like, but I can go, hey, can you be on a podcast and explain this to people? Or, hey, Mayor Jensen, can you like maybe discuss this with me? Because the more that respectful, when you have that back and forth, at least you have the ability to have those discussions.
And so I've done that with other podcasters from the other side of the aisle. I mean, I had one that we did down in Fair Park. Was a very hostile audience for some. I think I was the only Republican in the room, and by the time I left, you could once they asked questions, and we were just having a conversation, and I didn't get defensive when they asked a very politically loaded question.
Right.
That's where I am fortunate enough to have been through enough media training to understand there are ways to answer questions that they don't deflect it, but they do soften the response. And
Right.
you run into issue. There are times where I'll say, look, there are going to be a couple of items where we just we're not going to agree politically. We know that.
Right.
So why do we want? Let's not go. Let's try and find common ground on stuff that we do agree on. And again, I've been on with several folks from other side, and I've never had any. Knock on wood, I've only had one media person that I actually really got sideways with, and it was they screwed up. My campaign made a mistake. We owned up to it. And then they kept pounding it on behalf of the other side. And I finally told the editor at the Dallas Morning News, I said, I have been a completely open book with folks. I will never answer another question from this reporter again, period. End of discussion. He now writes, I think he writes for the Washington Post.
Wow.
That's the only reporter I have ever had any issues with. And again, even locally, you can tend to diffuse it if the other side is when the other side gets to where they're completely unreasonable, you just go, whatever, not going to feed the trolls.
Yeah.
They're going to go do whatever they're going to do.
Well, I think that it's really important for people to know, like, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on today is because I wanted people to see, like, you all have faces. Our elected officials have faces. And I know that right now you're not an elected official currently, but you have been, and I don't know if you will be again, but like, but y'all have faces, and you can create that relationship where you can ask questions. And it's important that we do that. I think that as constituents, especially, that we educate ourselves by not only just reading things on the internet, but also by trying to talk to people that are actually doing the job and understanding.
I would encourage anyone that is go to the source. I will promise you that the folks on Grand Prairie City Council, from Swafford to Del Bosque to Mr. Lopez to Mr. Gessner, Mayor Jensen, Copeland,
Woodridge.
Wooldridge. I was sitting there talking. I'm still missing one. I said Cole.
Oh, you said Cole.
Georgia.
Georgia.
How do you forget Georgia? Sorry, Georgia, if you're watching. My apologies. My apologies. Don't shoot me at Rotary. I apologize. But whether you'll go to, they're there for a reason. School board decide the same. If you're on school board, whether you're talking to Mr. Brooks or Miss Lyles or Espinosa or Gloria or Aaron, any of them, they'll talk to you.
Yeah.
And you can ask them difficult questions. They'll talk to you about it. And now you may not like the answer they give,
Absolutely.
but that's okay. But have the dialogue directly with the elected officials, and that's what a lot of folks forget. Is that, hey, when I was elected official, we're servants. We are your representatives. And I can't tell you the number of times that legislation arose because somebody had a conversation with me.
Yes.
One of my biggest pieces of legislation that I passed was a change to the Amber Alert that covered those from 18 to 65 with intellectual disabilities. And it allowed for that activation after we had a young lady, her name was Tiffany, that she went missing. They found her about 10 days later. She was dead. And as they were interviewing people around town, over in Mansfield, they found that, there were several people that saw her, but didn't know she was actually missing. And, she was 31 years old, but had the intellectual capacity of a 5-year-old. Couldn't figure out how to find her way home or to ask for help. And when she did, she was looked at as a homeless person with, and just ignored. And so we were able to pass that bill when I got a call from Richard Mills in his group at Mary's House, where my nephew Sean would go. It's kind of an adult daycare, an adult dayhab, and said, "Hey, maybe you could help me."
Mm-hmm.
That's how. That's how we passed that.
Yeah.
And so when you have an idea, don't hesitate to call you. I know in my case, don't hesitate to call me, and I can refer you to you call your state rep. If your state rep won't listen to you, give me a call and I'll find one that will.
I'm telling you, like, you are a prime example. That's exactly what I did. Me personally, I can attest to that, because when I saw something, I was like, Rodney, I don't know if you can help me, but this is something that I wanted to talk to you about. And again, it was another emotional situation. It was another thing dealing with. It doesn't have to be something that you consider to be this big, huge thing. Sometimes what's big to you, what you think might be big to you, but isn't really big to everybody else, doesn't mean that it's not important. And
it's
you
not.
need
That's
to make
exactly.
sure that you're, yeah. So don't just put a shit aside and say nobody from Texas would care about this, because you have no idea how many people would. But it has to start with that conversation. Yeah, and I think that it's really important.
I was shocked at the fitnessgram when we were trying to get rid of the fitnessgram. I was stunned by the number of people who came up to me and just, we had this one little girl that came up and testified before committee of the emotional angst it put her through in front of all her peers. I mean, it was gut-wrenching. And then to find out I had two fellow legislators whose children, one of them, he had, I won't mention his name, but he's got a daughter that got a report back from the company, from this company, that said, your daughter is obese. You're a 13-year-old girl, and you get this, and you already have, in her case, she had trouble putting on weight. And for some reason, somebody had a data entry error, and she gets called obese. The emotional, I mean, it just, that was a legislator's daughter that happened to. And I don't have any daughters, but I've got, my son Andrew. There's no secret. My son Andrew's always been a big kid from the time he was born big, and he never stopped. And what happened to him in 5th grade should just be freaking criminal. And it's not that the teacher, it's not that the teacher did anything wrong. It's that, they're trying to get these kids in and out and get them through. And the teacher did absolutely nothing wrong when you followed a protocol, but how 5th grade kids are, going after the fat kid. And that was that was, to me, that's what most legislation starts out as, something personal, that whether it happened to a legislator or to an individual. My hearing aid bill, that House Bill 490 was probably the best bill I ever passed. And what it does is it mandated that insurance companies cover hearing aids for kids. Believe it or not, insurance companies were using what was called a cosmetic loophole to not cover hearing aids for kids up to the age of 18. So you would have you'd have a kid that's diagnosed very early on, that if they had gotten hearing aids earlier, cochlear implants early on, they'd have been able to stay on grade level, would have been able to avoid all kinds of ARDs, all kinds of expense. But that came because I had a family that came in and said, hey, we can't afford hearing aids for my daughter, but we still make too much money that she's not covered by Medicaid. What do we do?
Right.
And we were able to get that passed. Now, you talk about the angst. I had the entire insurance industry fighting that bill because it was an insurance mandate. I had the governor saying, I don't want any mandates coming across my desk. I picked up a Senate sponsor on the other side of the aisle in order to do it. And it was one of these things that were experienced enough, and we knew how to work behind the scenes with real life examples. The other thing we were able to do is to quantify that it was only going to cost about 20 cents per insurance policy a year is what it was going to cost.
Well, and I know that a lot of people probably listening right now are probably sitting here going, just getting frustrated, because you're like, this is just, it can be so maddening. But I look at it and I think to myself, I'm glad that we exist in a type of government where we have that ability to be able to change things. And it might not change tomorrow, but it will change. And there's, so I just want to encourage everybody that's listening. I've always encouraged this, like, talk to your elected officials, have a relationship with them. Your local city officials, like, they want to talk to you, and I don't ever want anybody to think they're just discarded or like they don't matter. So that's the one I've always been a proponent for, like, our elected officials, making sure that you're talking to them, making sure you're voting, making sure that you're understanding how all this stuff works, because that's important. It's so very important. So Rodney, I just really appreciate you being on today.
I know I took up more than an hour of your time. It's one of these.
I took up more of an hour of your time. I know that you're busy, and I know that, I don't want to, I could talk to you for all afternoon. So
but your podcast folks probably go, man, this guy we're getting a little boring. We're way down in the weeds on this stuff, but
no, I think that's so important. I do.
If they can take one thing away, in all sincerity, it is know your elected officials, whether your school board, your city council members, your state reps, your congressman. I'll give you a little dirty little secret about your congressman. If you ever get a hold of your congressman's cell phone number, they will absolutely love it if you call them, because once you reach that congressman level, everybody thinks that you're untouchable or that you're inaccessible.
Really?
If you have a congressman's phone number, call them. You'd be surprised.
Really?
You would be surprised at how few phone calls that the Congress people themselves actually get. Now, their staff get all kinds of calls, but if their staff gets all kinds of calls. But if you actually get a congressman, and I'll tell you the fastest way to their heart is to write a letter, kicking it old school now, writing a letter that's handwritten. And because I can tell you, as a legislator, as I was corresponded with, that's how I corresponded back. You send me an email, you get an email back. You send me a typed letter, that's a form letter. Form letters got very little response. If you sent a personal letter, we gave you a personal response. But if you wrote a letter or something to us, I almost always responded either with a personal telephone call or with a handwritten note coming back. And
that's so interesting.
The good ones do that. The good ones, and that's not just me. The good ones will do that. I know we would send out letters. We wanted feedback of what was important to the district. One year we got about 1,100 of those letters back, and we categorized them by what was their most important item, and we let them know. So once we got it back, we responded to let them know that we got it. We'll let them know about anything that happens on that topic. We then, at the end of session, we sent them another letter that said, here's what happened during session on that particular topic. And I did that because there were some people that were diametrically opposed to what I did and to what but I would send back to them and said, this was the topic, this is what was done, this is the way. And one of them even took that letter and put it out on social media, mocking, saying, how dare he even respond? Like,
oh my gosh.
Well, because it was one of those, I'd say, here's your issue was this. This is what happened on your specific issue. Just keeping informed. I know we're on the opposite side here, but I thought it's important that I still keep you informed about what happened because I do represent you as well. Please don't hesitate to call if you have any questions. And that's the way I did it. And
wow.
And I encourage any of the electeds locally or otherwise, make sure that you do that as well. Make sure you stay, because you'll have detractors, but make sure you still correspond with them.
Well, even Emily, like the other day, Emily Lyles, she's on school board, and I thought, like, she sent out on Facebook, she's like, I know this is not normally what I would do, but why don't y'all tell me, like, how are things going with homeschooling? Tell me your opinion. And she opened up that conversation, and I was like, that's exactly what you should do. Like, of course we want to have those open conversations, and it's up to her how she decides that but it's take advantage of those times. I mean, what a cool idea, like, it would be for, like, schools to, like, students to kind of see how they could get back, like, correspondence from some of their elected officials.
I will tell you, student letters, I loved them. I loved them. And,
really?
Because I could go on all day about this stuff, but we had an occasion where a few years ago there was a walkout at Nabisky over immigration stuff.
Ooh.
And they had the teachers had managed to be able to corral them. They had gone to the superintendent, and the students wanted to see someone higher than the superintendent. They called me. I was at Rotary. I'll never forget. I was at Rotary, the Friday Rotary. I get a call. I get a text that said, would you mind coming by here? Very hostile environment. These kids had walked out. There was about 50 or 60 of them. And what I noticed in talking to those kids, you could see out of the kids, you had a few of them that they just went along just so they could cut school and get out.
Right.
You saw a good portion of them that had genuine fear in their eyes. They had genuine fear that the state of Texas was going to round up their mom and dad and send them home. It was a genuine, absolute fear and what was going to happen to them if that happened to mom and dad. Now, you tell me as an elected, and you're sitting there in front of these kids that are all 9th through 12th grade, and you're sitting there as an Anglo guy who doesn't have to worry about that, has never had to worry about that, and that's the constituency that you represent, and you're able to, the fact that I showed up and that I went there as a, wait a minute, this is someone from the state. This is someone who represents us at the state. And I'll never forget, I mean, this one little girl, she's junior. She was so the anger in her eyes and in her face and in her, you could just see it, but it was anger born out of fear. When I walk them through the process of what the state was trying to do, how we were actually trying to protect, in many cases, immigrant communities because they're taken advantage of by transnational gangs, all that kind of. There's a whole subculture that happened, or not subculture, but a whole section of victims that the victims will not come forward because they may themselves be undocumented. And
Right.
you can talk about that with Chief Dye or with Chief Cesney, of how they really want these folks to go. If you're a victim, you got to come forward. We're not looking to deport victims. We're not looking to take advantage of victims. But that type of accessibility, at the end of the discussion, I was there for about an hour and a half, and the end of the discussion, I said the school administration had promised them that after talking, that they could either, if they wanted to go ahead and leave, they would not stop them from leaving. Every one of those kids went back to class. Every one of them. Not because I think of what I said, but because that I took the time to say, look, this is really why we're doing what we're doing. Here is my cell phone number, and I held my cell phone up just like that. And I'll give it to you guys as well. 214-293-8067. 214-293-8067. If you want to put that at the very beginning, you can put it at the very beginning, however you want to do it. That's the way I stayed in contact. And I gave them that. I said, if you run into anything, you call me. You have your parents call me. And
you did something very important. You validated what they were experiencing. I mean, just by showing up, and what you're talking about is empathy, and it's being able to look at somebody in the face and understand that their feelings matter. You might not agree with them, but their feelings are important, and acknowledge that they exist. And I think that you made a very good point, is saying, when you look at somebody in the face and you look at someone in their eyes, now tell me how you could not be affected by that. All too often, I think that we are so in this social media culture where we don't see the other person and we don't really understand where they're coming from. But to be able to do that is so very, oh my gosh, it's just so very important. And you know what? Here's the other part too. What you did was you created, and Chief Cesney and I actually talked about this, a trust, because there's a lot of people that don't trust the system.
Right.
When they see that they can trust, what do? Now they go tell their kids that you can trust the system, and they go tell their friends you can trust the system, because I met this person, I met, Representative Anderson, and he came and he saw. So I get it. That's why this matters. And Chief Cesney talks a lot about that, being able to trust police department, and when you have like this trust. And so for me, when I witness stuff like that, me as a person that's not even an elected official, I can say, call him, talk to them. They don't feel the way that you think that they feel. I'm telling you right now, call them and talk to them. It's about, yes, there's not always a trust in the system, but there needs to be somewhat of a trust in the system.
So what the reason I'm laughing is because a lot of times the only thing that people see is around election time, when they're told, that this individual is a horrible individual, this individual is they're that, and which again, that's a lot of times is the only thing people see. Is how does any of that, the positive stuff I talk about, how does that go onto a push card? How does that go into a mail piece? It really just doesn't. And,
no, it doesn't. It doesn't.
And that's that's why I was giggling.
Yeah, but it's true, and that's why I always try to be an advocate for elected officials. I'm not advocating for what you say. I'm not advocating for what you believe, but I'm advocating for you. And I'm saying, look, I don't want to be an elected official. That's not something I have the ability to do, nor do I want to, but I can advocate for people to go talk to you. And I think you just explained a very good scenario in which why that's important, is to be able to just validate,
And again, for me, I'm not an elected anymore, and I don't try to go out and I understand why most former electeds try and stay out of the way of the others, and because I have empathy. I know what my Democratic counterpart, I know what she's going through, as a state rep, And I know that, it's a lot of time away from home. It's a lot of time away from family. It's many times, there's a lot of perks that go with it, but if you're doing it and doing it right, it is your income suffers from it, your business suffers from it, because, and the same holds true, if you're at a city council or a school board level. I mean, you're expected to be at every open house, every event, every it becomes expected. And if you're working, if you're earning a living, I mean, it's very, very difficult to be at everything. And that's why, again, I just encourage your listeners, please go directly to your electeds, because what you get in the mail come election time, what you get, politics is an ugly sport. It is my granddad told me when I first got, he goes, I don't think your skin's thick enough. And one of the things that happens is you kind of get, after the first few, after a certain number of arrows, you just kind of go, okay, whatever. And and you learn to just let it go. And
I wish everybody that I knew could spend one day with somebody from, especially like a local, like a city councilman or because I've had the ability to do that because I've grown up in this town, so I have friends that I know, and I've been there when there's been a problem on, school board, like an emergency, like, oh my gosh, a student is missing and they're away with a teacher and we don't know where they are. I've been on the other side where I've watched those calls come in and seen how much, I've seen how much it can affect somebody when there's just incessant, and
it never stops.
And it never stops.
There's always something.
There's always something. And so I think that's what gives me a little bit different of a perspective about elected officials, because I see it. And it's not easy. It's not an easy life to choose, and you choose it. And I think it's something that needs to be respected. And I'm not somebody that thinks that not everybody's in it for the power trip, because there are some that are, but like most of the time, you guys are doing it because you really just want to make your communities better. And I think that that's a good thing. And it's,
That's exactly what when I first ran, when I ran against Kurt, it was one of these, nobody else was going to do it. And there was, Karen had run against him the year before. She was thinking about running again. And it was one that it made more sense for me to do it at that time. And, I hold no ill will, especially now that having been in office and knowing, he was in office about the same amount of time I was. I mean, I still got a lot of respect for him. And he and I have worked a lot of auctions with Jeff, just working the room on other sides. And I've got a lot of respect for anybody who's willing to put their name in the hat. I think Brian Parr is the newest of the electeds coming in school board, and he'll have a learning curve that he'll have to go through as well, just like everybody else before him. And there is a point, experience does matter. And so anyway, but I've taken if anybody's still on from an hour and a half or however you're going to do this, God love you. Thank you so much. Again, if you ever need me, I'm easy to find. Still out there. My website's still active at rodneyanderson.org. It really needs to be updated because I haven't updated it since I lost. So really need to update it, but I keep it active. And then my cell number 293-8067, 214-293-8067. Anybody can reach me anytime.
I'll put links up to everything so people can find you, but I just so appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You are certainly welcome. If you ever need me on again, give me a holler.
I will.
Okay. Thanks, Jenna. Have
Bye.
a great afternoon. Take care. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.